Nagyon szeretettel köszöntöm Önt a VNTV nézői
I would like to give a very warm welcome to you from our VNTV viewers. We are the channel of different knowledge. Many watched the previous interview with you, and now we come back with their questions. So you say that we don't just eat the food itself, but we consume information contained in the food. Furthermore, the food's genome communicates with our body's genome. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And on top of that, it's not really me saying it, but it's the scientist, so it's much more accurate than what I could say. And yes, it's a new vision about food. It's a way of seeing the intake of food not as calories or energy, or at least not only as calories and energy, but as an enormous amount of information that has the capacity to interact with our cells, interact with our genes, and switch on and switch off the genes according to one simple principle. Is it good information or is it bad information? And unfortunately, in the modernization of food intake, we lost a little bit track on what is good food and what is bad food.
Tudjuk, hogy a táplálékaink nagy része génmanipulált.
We know that a lot of our nutritions are transgenic. These genetically manipulated foods contain different information. How do these manipulated foods influence our bodies negatively, and consequently, how does the body change?
Változások jönnek létre a testünkben ezáltal.
Well, this is a big question, and the answer is nobody knows. And that is really the bad point. So a lot of the scientists are saying that there are no proofs that genetically modified food is harming the human being. But on the other side, I think we should not wait for a proof that it harms. We should look if it has any benefit before using it. And there is no proof that it has benefit. And the reality is that nobody can clearly say what effect it has at the molecular level. So if you think about the complexity of the interaction between food and our cells, and then you think about adding another layer of complexity because the food you have contains genes that come from something else, I am very skeptical. And on top of this, honestly, I don't see the benefit of genetically modified food, if not for the industry, but it's definitely not a benefit for the consumer. There is no proof that it's better for health. There is no proof that you can fight hunger in the world through this type of technology. Actually, since genetically modified food is on the market, hunger has constantly increased. So it's a big question mark, and it would be good if somebody would provide clear answers on this, but there are none in reality.
A paleolitikus táplálkozás nálunk nagyon népszerű hosszú évek óta.
The Paleo diet became quite popular in Hungary lately. It claims that we should follow the example of the cavemen, eating large amounts of meat and a few berries to achieve a healthy diet these days. However, if we would compare the information in the meats 100,000 years ago and the meat we eat today, we would see that the stress, the hormone treatments, and whatever that animal came across is poisoning our bodies on its informational level.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on this. I mean, the aspect of the paleo diet is very interesting from a scientific perspective to get more insight on our, let's say, food history and food evolution, but it cannot be translated in a specific diet, exactly for the problem you're saying. So we can think about a paleo diet, but we don't have paleo meat, we don't have paleo food, and we don't live in a paleo world anymore. So it's never going to be as it was at that time. So it can only be interpreted in a different manner. In fact, I have been discussing about this recently in Italy because this topic is very popular now. And the question is, you can take some aspects from all these very famous dietetic approaches, but none of them are perfect. You need to understand them, to put them in relationship with a lot of additional data. The studies of Laurent Corden, that is the scientist behind the paleo diet, are very interesting, but they are not the only ones. There are many other studies showing a different thing. There are many epidemiological studies showing that the consumption of meat, especially because of the type of meat we have today, is linked with a lot of diseases, including cancer. So we cannot just take a label and say, hey, the paleo diet is fantastic. No, it has to be much more analytical and, in my opinion, more in-depth the analysis we make about our nutrition today.
We say that the nutrition's DNA information is affecting our body cell's information substance, and that the cell which is born afterwards will have a different DNA information than before. What do you think?
There are different ways of seeing this. In reality, it has already been proven that there's a certain degree of transfer from one organism to the other for example, from mother to child, simply considering epigenetic regulation. So this is possible. It has been already proven. So on top of this, let's say, basic genetic transfer of information at the DNA level, what is transferred is the regulatory capacity on top of that. And so those signals that you acquire throughout the life, throughout your life, like through smoking or eating bad food or being very stressed or not doing exercise, are actually modifying not necessarily your DNA, but the regulation of the DNA, and this regulation can be transferred. This has been seen, for example, from mothers that smoke. So, although I think the picture is not 100% clear, it's a picture in evolution, because scientists don't have all this clear in mind at the moment, and also what exactly is switching on and switching off the genes is still unclear. Methylation, for example, is one of those signals that is switching off genes. So one could say it's fantastic to switch off dangerous genes. Yes, but methylation is also switching off protective genes. This has been shown, for example, in colon cancer. So I think balance in nutrition is going to be the key word. That's why also all these diets that become very famous, but they become famous because they are highly unbalanced in reality.
Sose hallottam az ő anyagaiban, illetve nem olvastam.
I haven't read among your materials how our thoughts can also influence cell multiplication while a new genome substance is born and changes. Not only the nutrition is able to carry information, but thoughts also have morphogenetic fields. To take this further within the body in between cell fields, thought vibrations also able to influence cell multiplication and the creation of the genome map. What is your opinion on this matter?
I think it's another step of complexity. So indeed it will be part of the picture, because definitely in the human species, and especially in modern human beings, thought is extremely powerful. Because we have such a huge cortex that obviously thinking has become probably our most powerful biological capacity. And I think the picture becomes even more complex, that the knowledge is even less, far less than in the field of food. There are some scientists that have gone that way, like Bruce Lipton, for example, that has definitely described his opinion about the influence of thought on genetic expression. Bruce Lipton at the same time has also been criticized by a lot of scientists that have said, oh, this guy is esoteric. So my opinion is we don't know enough, but we will get there. Sooner or later there will be more knowledge of how thoughts influences genetic expression, how electromagnetic fields will influence genetic expression. Definitely we will get there. I think it represents a little bit the change from biochemically based medicine into magnetic field based medicine that will probably come in the next 20, 30, 50 years, I don't know. But what I can say is that at the moment I don't see a lot of application in the sense that we can track what really happens. We know that thought is influencing a lot of things. We know that positive thinking, stress reduction, and a lot of techniques that work on the brain are extremely helpful for people, but we don't know exactly what happens at the genetic level. We can suspect that it improves gene expression, for sure.
Én nagyon köszönöm, hogy Bruce Liptont hozta példaként.
Thank you for mentioning Bruce Lipton, as his book on cellular consciousness was also published in Hungary. In his book, he writes about an experiment when they take stem cells into different nutrient solutions and they receive different stimulus. As a consequence, one becomes a bone tissue, the other a fat tissue, and the third a protein. So he declares that even on the single cell level, we have incredible consciousness. Therefore, we should accept that the 50 trillion cells that build up a body is capable of self-healing and to fight any sickness, if we allow it.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as I said, I mean, a lot of the pioneers that are really at the forefront of change are seen as a little bit strange. Just think about Semmelweis here in Budapest and what he had to go through to prove something very clear. And there are many cases in medicine. So again, Lipton is certainly discovering and discussing something that is absolutely important, and it will become the topic of more and more studies in the future. One of the key things that we always have to consider in medicine, that sometimes evidence, knowledge is not there because it's very difficult to capture. So just think about studying thoughts is already, extremely difficult challenge per se, because how do you capture thought? So I'm very interested in this field, and I hope that something more concrete will come out in the next years that will guide also us in the clinical world on how to better fine-tune thoughts of people in order to have better responses in the body.
A sejtek és a DNS-ek folyamatos evolúcióban vannak. Tehát láttuk a Lipton kísérletben.
The cells and DNAs are going through a constant evolution, as we could observe in the Lipton experiment how a cell could change its genome map and become a bone tissue. So how is this possible that they can adapt? Furthermore, what about the idea that the genetic heritage determines our lives? I feel a little contradiction here. What do you think about this?
But I think it is contradictory. It reflects actually two faces of a very complicated molecule like the DNA is. So on one side you have the basic genetic information, which is, let's say, unchangeable in its structure. And when it has a severe damage, like when you have a genetic disease, you have the real proof that that type of damage is unchangeable. However, this picture has been modified by the most recent research in the last 20 years that says, yes, that's one part, but there's a high degree of plasticity inside the DNA at the regulation level. So once again, you might have gene A, B, C, D, but you don't know which ones are active. And if they are active or not makes a difference in terms of phenotype, so what you become. So from the genotype, which is what is contained inside your genome, what this information is transformed into, so the phenotype, there are a lot of different steps that go through. And these steps are very dynamic, very plastic, and very influenceable from the information that comes from the outside world. So I think it reflects two different properties of the DNA. On one side, a high degree of stability. On the other side, a high degree of plasticity. And think about the fact that 99.9
Fantasztikus, amit mond, ezt elektromos nyelvre lefordítanám.
I really like what you are saying, and I would like to translate this into an electrical language. So let's say that the genome is like an aerial that has a basic tune that is able to pick up new changes and information dynamically, and if needed, alter itself for an evolutional survival.
Absolutely. I think this is a very good metaphor. And so it tells you a lot about how complicated at the end this whole thing is. So I doubt, honestly, for example, when you think about high-tech future opportunities of intervention, like gene therapy, gene manipulation, or drugs that are selectively acting on certain type of genetic regulation, like telomerase activation, I think it's going to be very difficult to control the process like this. Unfortunately, here comes into the picture the soft touch, you know. I think probably nature has, in reality, in its essence, all the capacities to regulate this perfect. And if we go a little bit back to what nature can provide in terms of stimulation, then we get the answer. If we hope to regulate everything with a high-tech approach, I think it's going to be very difficult because the process is too complicated and there are too many factors inside that you can really control it.
Basically, we can sum up by saying that we need a more holistic approach in these areas, and this conclusion can close this interview. But before that, please allow me to say thank you for accepting our invitation while you came to visit Hungary for the second time. According to our tradition, I would like to ask you to share the essence of your experiences that you gathered during your visits in our country.
Well, I think the message is very interesting because Hungary has one big problem in respect to many other European countries. It has the worst health outlook of all the European countries. So there's a lot of work that can be done here. At the same time, I am seeing in the last period that I'm here, more and more interest in people really growing. Also, you guys, the questions, the level of deepness of the discussion. So I think that this is, how can I say, it's a very good sign. And I'm optimistic that the more we work well and the more we meet people that are willing with different roles to spread this information, it's all about consciousness, awareness. If people open their eyes, then they will understand what to do and where to go. So that's why seeing things from a different point of view is a basic, start. Thank you.